I'm pumped up for today's show, and I hope all of you are as well. You're watching Philadelphia Eagles Now. My name is Chase Sr., and coming up, a unique opportunity here for us on the program. And our content style is limitless. It's very diverse. We talk about all things pertaining to the Eagles, whether it's news, rumors, reports, NFL draft, free agency. Obviously, during the season, we're giving you nonstop in-season content. But I also love chopping it up with other people, whether it be other content creators, people who cover the NFL, players, coaches, whatever. So coming up on today's Philadelphia Eagles Now, I sat down with John Middlekauff at the NFL Combine in Indianapolis, and here's what we discussed. He was a scout for the Eagles under Howie Roseman and Andy Reid. So he has some awesome Howie Roseman stories that he's going to relay here on the show. He also has the 3 and Out podcast with The Volume. That is Colin Cowherd's podcasting network, one of the GOATs and OGs in the sports media industry, and The Volume is taking off. So what's it like to podcast alongside Cowherd, especially having a podcast under his umbrella? What is Jalen Hurts' fit going to be in this new Eagles offense? What happens with A.J. Brown? It's all coming up right now. Your boy Chase Sr., John Middlekauff, sitting down to talk Eagles. Enjoy. John Middlekauff, 3 and Out podcast here in Indianapolis for the 2026 NFL Combine. I'm Chase Sr. And John, a long time coming. I think you do a great job with your podcast. And I'm seeing you yesterday. You're dapping up Ben Johnson. You're hanging out with Howie Roseman, John Schneider. And it's a pleasure to have you here on the show. I'm just really curious, like, you started off as an NFL scout under Howie Roseman at the NFL level. Then you start to get into broadcasting. What was it about broadcasting that got you interested in the industry, which has led to high levels of success where now you're doing shows with the likes of Colin Cowherd, who's one of the GOATs, and you're on a major podcast network with The Volume?
Yeah, I mean, I when I was in college, I wrote for my school newspaper. I don't even know if those things exist anymore. The Mustang Daily, where I went to Cal Poly. Chris Gokong, who was drafted a long time ago for Philly, 3rd round from Cal Poly. And so I was always kind of, putting my toe in that water. It just, the football thing kind of took off, and I ran with it, and then made a pivot when Chip Kelly came in and I got let go in Philly and kind of just got into like local radio and just one of those things that just kind of organically took off. I mean, I've never been like when I worked for the Eagles, Howie Roseman knew he was going to be a GM like 5 years old. When I got into radio, one of my best friends, Guy Haberman, who is now it was the voice of the Niners this year when Papa
Friend of the show?
Yeah. So
Had him on.
Guy knew he was going to be a broadcaster when he was 5 years old. I'm someone as people are like, what are you gonna do in 2 years? Like, that's not really the way I work. I just kind of feet down, start swinging, and see where it goes. So it was just one of those things that organically took off, and turns out it's one of the only skills I have is to be able to talk. So he just kind of ran with it, and now I'm sitting here.
The connection with Colin Cowherd, how did that come about? Was it just you rising up, ascending in the industry?
Yeah, well, I think no. I mean, when I first got out, I opened a Twitter account when I got out of the NFL. I started tweeting a lot. Just different takes, and he followed me. He's boys with Andy. So I think they kind of linked up and maybe asked about me. He started having me on the show at ESPN.
Cool.
So this was probably like 2013, 14. I started going on a show, and then I started a podcast, the 3 and Out podcast, probably like 2018, 19 range. That was before The Volume, kind of under him. And then he started that company, and we just put it there, and we've just been rocking and rolling ever since.
Why do you think your career has been able to take off to the likes that it has? Is it your background in football? Is it your connections? The fact that, as you mentioned, you're a really good talker, because you look at some of the top football podcasts. You're my go-to podcast. You really do have a stranglehold on this space. And then here at the NFL Combine, at the Super Bowl, you're chopping it up with some of the top figures across the entire NFL.
Well, I mean, I know Howie.
Yeah.
Some of these other guys I'm just going up to and talking.
Cool.
So, I mean, I got pretty lucky. I was telling someone last night, we shut down a bar like 3 a.m. with a couple GMs. But, like, working for the Eagles, there was like a 5-year stretch where, like, half the league was there. And before I got there, like a year before, Jason Light, who's the GM of Tampa, John Spytek, who's now the GM of the Raiders. These guys had just left. So, in a weird way, indirectly, I know those guys. I just saw Mike Borgonzi, who I don't know, but he worked forever with Veach and one of my good friends, Mike Bradway, and I just went up to him, and he knows me through Mike Bradway. So I just have a lot of indirect relationships. But like I didn't have a personal relationship with Saul. I just went up and introduced myself. And like I'm not the most social person. Like I'm not a you wouldn't find me at most conventions like networking with people. I'm pretty ruthless when it comes to my business and podcasts, and it's like good for my podcast and business. So it's like I just been pretty aggressive here, and it's easy. Like I've been around coaches and GMs and scouting those type people my whole life, my whole adult life. So I'm pretty comfortable around those guys, and I don't know. I find an easy way to connect. Like I went up to John Harbaugh yesterday. I named my son Jack.
Yeah.
Well, John and Jim's idol is their father, Jack Harbaugh. So when I told him, I don't know John, but again, John's very close to Andy Reid. So I can originally introduce myself. Hey, I work for Coach Reid. He will stop and talk to me. And then when I said I just named my son Jack, he lit up. And so it's just I guess I'm pretty good at just creating football guys like football guys.
Yes.
You and I can just have a conversation about football.
Yep.
You could put me anywhere in America, whether it's the worst place or the greatest place. If there's people there ready to talk football, I'm gonna get along with them. So it's a great equalizer. We just talk some football.
Brings people together too. Was
Yeah,
it Prime 47 here in Indy that you shut down last night?
No,
That's
it was a little
spot.
hole in the wall.
Okay.
I didn't plan on it. It
Yeah.
just kind of happened.
I love that.
I don't quite. I'm not. I don't.
You're a
quite
father
have
now,
yeah,
so
I had no
those
life.
3 a.m. nights don't happen too often.
No, not at all.
For our Eagles audience, millions of people watch the show worldwide, and they absolutely adore and love Howie Roseman, rightfully so. I think he's going to go into the Hall of Fame. He's won 2 different Super Bowls with 2 different quarterbacks and 2 head coaches. Only the likes of now John Schneider have been able to do something like that. On your show, you often talk about how ruthless he is because of the competitive nature that he possesses and how there is a will to succeed and work really hard inside that Eagles organization. Any noteworthy Howie stories in you working with him that kind of stand out to you that have resulted in him being who he is?
Well, I talked to him. He's very aggressive. He's aggressive 24/7, 365. He's like that in June as he's like in the middle of the season. You're kind of wired like you're wired, and he's from New York, just 100 miles an hour. Like there's no like off speed. So I think that's most human beings have a little bit of like let off the gas. There's no letting off the gas. He's obviously really smart, but he's willing. I asked him yesterday because when I was first around him in 2010, I didn't know who Howie Roseman was when I got hired. He's the new GM, and I started working for him, and I realized like this guy's crazy smart, crazy aggressive. I mean, he'd piss you off. He'd scream at you. I mean, it was an intense environment. Football's intense. And he was willing to do a bunch of deals back then, but the league wasn't like that. And the league now has a bunch of guys that are much more wired, younger GMs wired like Howie, willing to deal. It's more of a wheeler and dealer league. It's actually perfectly made for the guy, and I think he's just very, very aggressive. And it starts with the owner always gives the green lights of always doing stuff. He clearly, I think, is like mastered. I mean, even this year, it's like the quarterback wasn't playing well and the offensive line was banged up, but their team's really talented. His ability to that shift they had, that Rager moment, I think was like a pivotal time for the Eagles. And then they doubled down on big school guys who could play, and it's like their floor was a lot higher, and obviously they hit on a bunch of guys. They had that one year where they had all those picks, and they were able to trade for AJ. I think you go back to they emphasize offensive and defensive line. That goes back to Andy Reid. Emphasize the quarterback. I mean, they drafted Jalen Hurts. That people thought it was crazy. Jalen keeps playing like he's playing. They will draft another quarterback.
They will.
So I mean, they might draft a guy this year. Obviously they were invested in the Stanford guy.
Tanner McKee.
I don't think he played that well in the one game.
He did not with backups, but he's shown some flashes.
I was excited for
Throws
him.
Throws with good timing, touch, and accuracy.
So I mean, but they are a quarterback. I think Howie said this. No organization has benefited more from the backup quarterback in like the history of the league, besides like maybe the Bill Walsh 49ers, than Howie. So I think aggression. He's obviously smart. But when you see some of these guys like Kwesi gets fired, like Kwesi ain't banging out film. Like Howie watches all the draft guys, all the free, like he does all the elements of the job, and it's taken a lot of pride. Like he always wanted to be a football guy, so writing up players, watching guys, stacking guys, like the stuff that makes quote unquote football guys like John Schneider or whatever, like he likes doing that stuff. I think when you hear like contract, and he's graduated well out of this, like he could do that in his sleep, but like he likes the draft meetings, and you hear some of these stories, like why didn't this GM last? Like he doesn't even care about the meetings. It's like, well, he got no shot, none. So I think Howie's passion, going back to when he was a kid for the draft. I mean, he loves the draft. I mean, the draft is clearly a Super Bowl. But for this time, free agency it's probably harder for them during free agency, right? Because they have a high-priced team. It's not like they have an unlimited amount of money to sign guys.
Yep.
So it's probably more of a little move here or there, or a trade. But I think the draft is. I don't know what their pick status is this year. Obviously, AJ is a little bit of a wild card.
8 picks inside the first 5 rounds, 23rd overall in the first round.
Yeah, and then if they wanted to trade AJ, they'd probably get a top 50 pick, right? I heard some people say yesterday first, but I don't think they want to trade him. Like they like AJ Brown. AJ Brown is well liked in the organization, and I think it's complicated because the relationship with the quarterback. I don't know how it's going to play out, but they're not just going to be like, oh, take him for a third. Like you're going to have to pay to get him.
Sticking with the Eagles, where do you kind of see this team right now? They win double-digit games again for the 4th straight year under Sirianni. They've been in the playoffs 5 years under Sirianni. I know a lot of people are wondering, and sometimes you as well, like, what does Sirianni do? They bring in a new offensive coordinator. They are changing the scheme. Talking to Howie and Nick yesterday, they really wanted to bring in Sean Mannion, partially because he comes from that Kyle Shanahan, Sean McVay scheme. And they wouldn't make that move. I was talking to Greg Cosell about this if they didn't think that Jalen could play in that system. So I think this is a fascinating team going into 2026.
Can he play in that system? I don't know.
This is going to be the year where we see. Yeah. Where do you see the Eagles? How do you evaluate them right now?
I was with a pretty prominent player on the 49ers a couple years ago on an airplane flying to the Super Bowl. This was in New Orleans. And we were talking about, the Eagles and Purdy and Jalen and everything. This at the time when that rivalry felt like it was pretty hot. And this guy, not a big believer in Jalen, but we were talking about the offense. And I remember thinking, because this guy supported Purdy as all the 49ers do. But, part of it is, Purdy's really good in that offense. Knows Shanahan's offense. You think Jalen could run that? And he, laughed. And now, what Kyle asked you, it's one thing to just run the offense. It's also the way the plays are called, what they allow you to do. But Jalen won't run anymore. He won't run.
Yeah.
So he's a dual threat quarterback. Peyton Manning, Tom Brady, they can't run. Jalen, not only is he he's a really good runner. He's a natural, he's not like Lamar fast. He's more like a Frank Gore in the open field, kind of feels his way, but he's a natural at it. But he doesn't want to do it anymore. So if he's not going to run, and in the Shanahan offense, it enables you with some of the boots and waggles if no one bites. You can take off and stuff. Is he going to be willing to do that? Because if he's not, then to me, he's just going to become a mediocre player.
Yeah, and as you said, if he struggles this year, they're going to be drafting a quarterback.
If he struggles this year, I don't think he'll be on the team next year. They've shown, they will pivot fast. They are not going to pay all this money for all these good players, have this GM who can build teams, and let a quarterback derail them who they think is, not willing to do what needs to get done to win. I mean, look at, people make fun of the Herberts and stuff. All these other quarterbacks are willing to dive and run. Jalen used to do that and he's just kind of he does feel like he's on a little bit of a Russell Wilson trajectory of I want to play my way, which I think can be scary.
Yep. Most expensive offense in the NFL last year. It's not going to cut it if they.
And Robert Saleh beat him with me and you playing on defense.
5th, 6th, 7th.
It's one of the worst losses in the history of the Eagles.
I agree. I was disgusted about it.